Yeah, we get it. You're a commie.
Okay.
We got it.
Then I'll give it.
we're getting
I'll
really
give
into
my
the
friend back to it. Then I'll
We
try
prefer the
something
term
else.
cometard, okay?
Okay. Thank you all for being here, and I really do appreciate you guys taking your time on Labor Day. Because you guys could be doing other things, right?
You are
Like,
paying all of us, right?
yes. I'm paying you the same way I'm paying Scott. So
I expect tax forms.
I'm
Brian.
actually
I'm
good
like
on the
happy.
hugs and kisses.
Yeah,
I'm good.
I need like a I-9 or whatever.
I don't know what they're called in the United States, but I want tax forms.
no, if you don't know what you're called, then I'll definitely send you tax forms. If you have no idea what those things are, sure, no problem. Topic 1. The NYPD will be using aerial drones to monitor backyard parties this Labor Day weekend. If they get a complaint, they will have drone teams ready to mobilize and observe the situation. If deemed necessary, officers can be sent to intervene. Consistently over the years, Labor Day weekend has had bloody outcomes due to gun violence. With that in mind, is this an acceptable use of police surveillance? If more protections were in place to uphold civil liberties, would that affect your answer? And if we can't stop the encroachment of new forms of technological surveillance, isn't it better to embrace them with heavy regulations? So, yeah, was just announced like I think days, like 2 days maybe before Labor Day weekend. It was just like very quickly. Eric Adams, the cop mayor of New York, unsurprisingly wanted to empower the cops. He got this idea. He got this idea on a trip to Israel. And he's like, I like the surveillance technology here. I want to take this back to New York. He said something along those lines, and yeah, so we did, and so we created this program. He's rolling it out this weekend, and as far as I know, at least from that announcement, that it was just Labor Day weekend, but maybe he said otherwise somewhere else. But they're getting started. So I really want to. I'm curious what you guys think about the implications, and like, could there be safety benefits here? So we'll start with our friend Lacto.
Yeah, so very briefly, the use of police drones is actually very hotly contested as an issue legally. There are arguments on both sides that actually, under the standards set by Kylo versus United States, they may, in fact, be unconstitutional. However, there is currently no definitive case law that answers that question. So they are generally legal in most jurisdictions, as far as I'm aware. And so that's obviously why they're being brought in here. As to my personal opinion, as much as I hate the idea of police flying surveillance drones around, looking at me while I'm walking around my yard, the fact that they are only sending them when complaints
Drones
are
are
made.
here.
Yeah, they're
You
fucking
have some
they're
drones
flying
in your
around.
house? What is that?
It's my phone. The fact they are only sending the drones when complaints are made, I think, seems reasonable. And in my mind, the first thing I thought of was that it seems comparable directly to police helicopters, right? Police helicopters can be called and fly over cities, and officers can look down upon events occurring. And we just kind of accept this as happening, and nobody has a real problem with it. I think the real difference here is that because drones are cheaper, we're concerned about them being used more often. However, I don't know how solid that is. Drones are cheaper for everybody. They can be purchased by members of the general public as long as they aren't scanning the insides of homes. Just about anybody can buy a drone and fly it up into the air, and in public areas, certain designated areas, and potentially look down into people's backyards. The real question, I think, really this is just how much we want the police patrolling. I think there are high crime areas that could definitely use more police presence, and so I think generally I'm okay with it.
Yeah. So Lactoid walks around his yard naked, self-report, clearly.
He brags about his backyard all the time, too, right?
There we go.
And doesn't mind who's looking.
Let's go to our friend Corey.
Yeah. So this is a little bit tricky. I don't have. I can go sort of either way on this. outline my leanings currently. But what I'll say is, like, I think it's really interesting how, like, as a result of a trip to Israel, like, this prompts an idea where, like, you know, I think Israel's in a pretty unique situation. I don't know all of the entire history of Israel, but I think that's a pretty unique overall location and a lot of unique history there that makes certain things unique maybe to them and not necessarily extrapolatable to the United States. But on paper, am I opposed to this in terms of like giving police more power to, you know, surveil or maybe save police resources in terms of like if it's actually used as described here in the prompt of like, well, instead of like before the police actually go and have an actual, you know, in-person presence, they have a drone, just check out the situation and whatever, thumbs up, thumb down, or, you know, if it works like that, I'm not necessarily opposed to that. But do I actually trust the police to not abuse this extra power? No, not really. So right now, the way I sort of like thread the needle of like, 'cause I don't know what the actual laws are, and I'll probably defer to Lacto, but even then, it seems like the laws aren't entirely clear now, or they're like being fleshed out. But I would say it's permissible for me to empower the police to have these drones if, and for surveillance, if it's permissible for the public to surveil the police with drones as well, where they could just, you know, up to the, you know, police patrol car, they can just hang around there, surveil them. If that's permissible, then like, yeah, have at it, I would say right now. That's where I lean towards.
Okay. Love everything that came out of Corey's mouth. And I like the idea of like the drones, like being an alternative to like an actual encounter with police officers. I didn't really think about it that way. If that's the way it's used, but we'll see. Let's go to our friend Iko.
Yeah, so my favorite part of this story is Mayor Adams apparently goes to Israel and says to himself, "Do you know what New Yorkers need? They need to be treated more like occupied Palestinians." Like that was the first thought that goes through his head. That just amazes me. So when it comes to like this kind of surveillance, and I know you know Lactoid talked about Kylo, but also there are other like precedences too, and typically it's that any kind of surveillance, if it's going to be tested for the first time, it needs to be sort of trailing edge. In other words, it needs to exist in other contexts first, and then and only then can you really think about it, right? And they call it, you have to have a reasonable expectation of privacy. And it seems to me that you should have a reasonable expectation. If you have a chain link fence, okay, maybe not in your backyard, right? But if you have a big wooden fence, you have a reasonable expectation of privacy. I don't think there's anything wrong with expecting privacy, even though your neighbor might, as again Lactoid said, might be flying their own drone in public spaces. But once they fly over your backyard, it's not a public space anymore. So I think, at least today, right now, at the current point, we have an expectation of a reasonable expectation of privacy in our backyards, which means that having like a police drone fly over it changes it, right? It violates our expectation of privacy. And I think until we get to some future point where we're constantly waiting for 7-Eleven to drop food off in our backyard or something, I don't know. Like after a while, maybe that expectation changes. But right now, I don't feel like it has sufficiently. Yeah, that's all I have to say about that right now.
Thank you. Scott.
So I find this to be, I actually really like this prompt. Because, you know, in a perfect world where police agencies are private and you had a voluntary usage of whether or not that police agency was for your property, this would be perfectly fine, right? This would be something you would negotiate. But it's important to remember that the state has no legitimacy to engage in any policing activity whatsoever. Police are an illegitimate occupying military force, so I don't understand why the fuck we would give them more power and more rights to spy on us while we're at a fucking barbecue. The real reason I think some people look at this and they're like, oh, this is crazy, we can't have this, is something that is, you know, it's kind of the antithesis of the submerged state, which is this idea in sociology that like the state does a bunch of stuff, but most of it is hidden from us. We have no idea what goes on in the bureaucracy. We have no idea like the layers of red tape and government and paperwork for a program to work, right? And so there are certain things that occur in an election cycle that can really ruin you as like a local candidate, right? And that is like trash removal and snow removal, right? Like these things are like ways that we see the state. And all of a sudden we're like, whoever's in charge is doing a bad job. And I think this is true with the idea of like a drone at your cookout. Is like the moment you see a drone at your cookout, you're like, oh my God, it's like it's a Minority Report is here. The fucking robots are flying over to see if I'm smoking weed at my fucking barbecue. Like, what is going on? And yet, like, nobody's really mad that the Holman Square facility in Chicago's still open. Like, we have black sites where we beat the shit out of and interrogate people with no due process, to try and find out gang information in the middle of Chicago. And then we just magically move them to another area. And like, what is it? Like last I checked, it was like approaching 10,000 people that have been held at Holman Square, and it's still open. You know what I mean? Like, so it's like, so long as we don't see it, it's not really a big problem to us. It's once when it looks scary, all of a sudden it becomes a problem because it looks scary to have drones and to hear about your neighbor having a drone. But when, gang members are locked up in a facility somewhere, nobody really cares, right? And so I do think it is an interesting thing. So ultimately, I would say the police have no authority to do this. But of course, the police have no authority to do a goddamn thing that they do anyways. And so how do we work with that? The way that we work with that is we should champion every effort to reduce their power as much as possible, always, until such a time that we can be free from the existence of the police state.
Hey, Scott, I had never heard of that facility you're talking about.
Never heard of the Chicago black site? Yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry, I've never heard of it at all. If you have something, if you have like an article or something,
Just literally, just Google Holman Square
Chicago
facility.
black.
You will find, or just Chicago black site. You will find
Chicago black.
hundreds of articles, all from like 2014,
in
2015.
Where
HOMAN.
HOMAN.
Supposedly
sorry,
they don't do black site stuff there anymore, but it's still open.
where facility?
Holman Square. Yeah, I see. Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Yeah, sorry, I've never heard of this. All right, but thank you for that. Let's go to our friend Nina.
I hate going. Can I get like right before Scott with the rest of the questions? Because I feel like he just says some insane shit that I feel like I do want to look into. But what the fuck was the main topic?
Aerial drones.
Oh yeah, no, I think it's insanely invasive for like no reason. Like, does the police really think that they're doing anything of an effective value by like seeing like people with their dicks out or whatever they're doing in their own backyards, grilling or whatever, like they're not really doing anything, and like the invasion of privacy just seems unnecessary. Um, so I guess like to be like I know a little long-winded previously with Scott, so I'm just gonna keep it a little short here. Where I think it's just seems like a silly Billy bullshit thing where like you don't have to come to I know that you wanted to come to my barbecue, but you couldn't. So that's kind of a you problem.
Thank you. All right, open to the panel.
Well, I guess
I'm against all of you, I guess.
Yeah, I was gonna say last choice.
I think this is a good idea. I don't see the major problem with it.
Well, so I guess I would need like I was maybe somewhat serious in terms of like where I stand of like, so what are the laws, or is there any like, can basically citizens surveil the police with a drone? Is that permissible?
Yes. In most places. It's pretty controversial with auditors. It is a thing that often happens where the police will like try and arrest or harass people that are flying a drone, but like basically our legal system, and Lactoid I'm sure has more information, it's really bad at like 3-dimensional property rights.
Yeah.
What constitutes but so long as you're not like in Virginia, for example, there are laws about drone, but like so long as you're within a certain altitude, it's kind of like a free zone where you can basically do whatever the fuck you want.
Yep.
But as a citizen, as Rich explained, there's a reasonable expectation of privacy. And so if I start drone footage of like a woman sunbathing in her backyard, or I don't know, a dude like, trying to like get a suntan on his asshole, because that's a thing now, like in his backyard, and like he's got,
Give it a try.
large privacy fence, all of a sudden, that becomes a problem. Where with the police, the police kind of can just do whatever the fuck they want, even when they violate the law.
I know,
like they kind of get away with it.
There's three-dimensional issues, so that's why I'm curious, Lactoid. This brings up an old 90s movie, I think, The Enemy of the State, of like, what do we get to the point of like citizen satellites, or to that point of like just like one person, or like now police have access to satellites, and they like pretty much like Enemy of the State, but even like more high resolution, or like actually see into your home. Is that more?
Oh,
is that
that's
You
that's
can't
the line.
legally have a satellite. Like the government will stop you.
not yet?
Right,
but,
so
like,
right, but
You
here's
already
here's the
Elon
point.
Musk.
Here's the point, right? So the home is considered different. Like constitutionally, it's very different. Legally, it's very different, right? You have a very clear expectation of privacy within your home, and I think that
Sure.
there-
Even in just like backyard, as in like now is your
backyard, I
free?
think you have less so. Honestly, I think backyard you have a much
Well, I don't
less
know.
so
Do you know
because
that
if anybody flying
you think
over can
that-
look down and see you. I mean, how could you expect to be private in a world in which
Well,
people have flying
You're
machines?
you're the lawyer here. Well, what's the legal like can somebody see you the same way in like your back, like if somebody's like trying to like spy on you, let's say. Like
It's
would you
super
have
gray.
the same
Yeah. So like,
legally,
it's
it's
an
super
unresolved
gray.
area.
It's an unresolved
It's
area.
just
So
like
like, so
looking
like,
through like a window. Like it's kind of like we don't.
so
really know.
if you fly the drone like up to somebody's second story window, I think that's going to be like, it's still going to be gray because there's nothing specific against it. But like, you're going to have a much harder time justifying that if the person like sues you, or if there's some kind of like civil dispute that comes up out of that, right?
Okay.
But if you're like flying your own drone above your own backyard, where you can see everyone else's backyards, you're probably going to be okay. Like, I don't see how they could really come after you for that.
Well,
And
I
so,
have to ask you, like, do you know how it would go with like peeping, for example? Like if like you were like I don't know, like on a second story window, and like you leave your window open because you assume nobody's going to see you, and then somebody's flying a drone looking at you changing. Like
right. And there's separate laws for that too, right? There's laws against like peeping toms, for example, of like, again, solidifying the concept of like the inside of your house, you having
Mhm.
this very strong right to privacy within your house. And
So
so
wait,
this applies to inside your house, but not necessarily to your backyard.
right? Like, why doesn't it apply to? Shouldn't you? Do you think that it should apply to your backyard? Because I think like I should be able to be naked as fuck in my backyard, and some asshole shouldn't be able to look at me.
So okay, so sure, you're naked in your backyard. Like, okay, and then there's a plane.
as
There's a plane flying
Lactoid is
overhead.
often.
Is the plane allowed to fly overhead,
Okay, but
or can they
I
just not
guess
look?
well, I'm saying like you shouldn't be able to take photos. I think that's probably like maybe where I would.
So okay, so like a news, like let's say there's like a newscopter, right, who's flying over a city,
Uh-huh.
and I have my backyard within the city where I'm butt naked, and the newscopter is covering this massive like protest or something. Do they have to like? Can they even fucking like record the protest because they can see my schlong right there in the corner?
No, they
because
can't.
Blur your
No, they
shit.
can't.
they could just blur. No, it's live. It's all live. They can't blur my shit. It's live.
Blur shit live? What are you talking about? You know?
I mean, there might be like AI algorithms
There's a
or
delay.
some shit.
No,
There might be some
there's
delay.
a delay on all the live programs now.
Oh, you're okay. Whatever. I'm not gonna make that joke, but whatever.
I'm
Go ahead.
bitch. I'm saying
I
you're
don't know
right.
if that's. But no, but so
No,
right. So
It's
yeah,
like there's
I'm
a
sure-
delay.
I'm-
They can blur the
Wait,
shit.
is me
Yeah,
now?
I'm sure they try to like blur it, obviously to like prevent issues coming down, and obviously to like not get in trouble with their network. But like, I don't know. What if I argued, well, even if you blur me, I just don't want to be on. I don't want to be on your news page. Like, what are they going to do? Just like put a big black box around my entire area, around the whole all the city, except for like the one street where the protesters are on? Is that the
Well, I mean,
future?
like maybe they don't like show like people like just sunbathing in their backyard like for fun.
But the
Like,
thing
do you
is,
really mean
I don't
like,
want
they
my
change
backyard.
your-
I don't want my backyard recorded.
Yeah,
It's my
period.
privacy.
He's got like a swastika
Are you
there,
gonna do,
right?
like, a
Swastika
chat?
tattooed.
I cut my lawn in a proprietary
In
way.
his
Okay, and I don't want
Canadian
you to see
lawn.
how I do it. Yeah. I
The
don't-
idea of having a lawn in Canada is adorable.
Yeah,
Look,
but
I don't think there's I honestly don't think that in today's age there's a reasonable expectation of privacy in a yard that's visible to the sky. Now, in your house, when you have a roof, I think you do have a reasonable expectation of privacy, because if people are going to like
Sure.
scan the inside of your house, this requires something targeted. This requires them literally like we're gonna. There's no other reason to do this besides scanning your fucking place, right? That's different than like again looking around, or in this case, the police get
Thoughts
a
on
complaint.
on umbrellas.
So the thing here,
I'm a
the
fan of
thing here,
umbrellas, and if you want to put an
Great.
umbrella up, you totally have the right to.
the
Scott,
thing,
go ahead.
the thing here is, I think you're kind of pointing out the flaw in the logic of reasonable expectation of privacy. Is that reasonable expectation of privacy? It makes sense in a snapshot moment of time, but as technology progresses, what is reasonable changes based upon the technological advances. So in 100 years, the idea of that you have a reasonable expectation of privacy in your home in a city where I don't know, maybe like some new form of like AI based multiple different types. So maybe it's like X-ray and heat vision and everything. And then it takes all that data and extrapolates it through an AI machine that attempts to recreate what's occurring in every house. And like, that's commonplace shit in like fucking VR on our phone face video games, augmented reality. What becomes an idea of reasonable expectation of privacy is tied to the current technological status. 100 years ago, Nina would be 100% right that in your backyard sunbathing with a privacy fence, you would absolutely claim you have a reasonable expectation of privacy, and that anyone that tried to claim that was false would be looked at like a kook. But now that we have drones and we have all of this aerial footage that's constantly occurring, reasonable expectation of privacy falls to the wayside. And what it really shows is that it is a subjective bullshit kind of like Band-Aid that we have slapped on to create like an idea of privacy from the state, and it really just doesn't work. And with all those contradictions in place, I would say without a doubt that you shouldn't be giving additional powers to police, because fuck
I'm
police.
curious though, Scott.
Yeah.
What's your solution here in terms of, let's say, okay, not the cops, but let's say I want to create a drone, fly it above your property with a big camera, and just like surveil you. Are you okay with this?
So here's what I would say, and this is, I don't want to get into siren song, so I'll try and be super quick and super easy, right? Like in a system of market justice, we will do things that don't necessarily violate the non-aggression principle because the community agrees to it. And I think most insurance companies and most communities would agree to the idea that like hovering a drone over someone's backyard to like get Pornhub content is not allowed within the community, number one. Number two, I would say that you can indeed homestead private property in a 3-dimensional space, which is to say that like, I think, you know, just like any property, it has no homesteading until it's been used. But eventually, I think air traffic controllers, for example, companies that are handling traffic in and out of an area would have homesteaded that 3-dimensional space as that company's private property, as they're the ones that are handling all of the vehicles coming in and out of said area. And I think the same thing would occur within communities for that kind of gray area, that eventually it gets homesteaded and certain companies own that.
Hold on, could I buy consensually
in my
with the air
world.
traffic? Could I buy consensually with the air traffic controllers? Could I buy all the airspace above your house and then hover a drone and like watch you?
Yeah,
Good
so I think absolutely that would be allowed. And at the same time, as I said, the funny thing about market justice.
Wait, hold on,
So,
Nina. 1 second, Nina.
I'll finish.
Finish the point.
I'll finish.
Go
But
ahead.
yeah, so the thing about, like I described earlier in terms of market justice, is kind of the same thing that occurs within common law practices throughout, you know, England and America, right? Is that, you know, there are court cases where there are gray areas, and then, you know, an institution decides this is kind of the new precedent that created the law via these court cases. I would say that the same thing occurs within a market justice system. The only difference is instead of having a state apparatus that says this is the law of the land for everyone, you have competition within different communities, and you have different forms of precedents that would likely be handled by said insurance companies.
Wait, Scott. So I agree. I understand what you're saying, sort of. And I also I think that you can draw a parallel between this and just like like statutes, right? Like the community decides they want to ban drones, or they pass a law saying you can't own drones or you can't fly drones
Yeah.
here, right? They could do that. They could pass a law saying the police aren't allowed to use drones, and that'd be perfectly legal. But my question for you, Scott, is if I buy consensually the airspace cube from the air traffic controllers above your house, how could you stop me from hovering my drone in my airspace without violating my property rights?
Yes, I completely agree that dependent upon if the covenant community or whatever area that you're set up is set up to where that is allowable, you know, then that would be an allowable thing. It's like if people choose to live in a society where this is allowed, will this be allowed? It's like, well, yes, it will be allowed because people chose to live in a society where that would be allowed. And do I think that's a bad idea? Yeah, I think it's a bad idea, which means it probably won't happen often. And after a few creeps do that shit and the value of that home gets like tanked because of some other person's like malicious intent in finding loopholes to spy on people, like things will change within the community. They'll probably look at it differently.
Couldn't the community only stop this if they managed to buy all the airspace above their community to prevent like people from having their drones hovering there?
Buy or homestead, yeah.
So if they bought all the airspace above their community, and you have a plane, let's say, traveling across, like, would they be allowed to trespass into this airspace, or would they have to fly around it?
I mean, so the long answer is I don't know how each individual covenant community is going to handle air traffic control. Like, and kind of to expect me to know that is kind of silly. I would say that I think companies have proven time and time again that they're very efficient at handling these interactions, especially when compared to the United States government.
Oh my God, companies are famously dog shit at being efficient about.
Bitch, go to a DMV. Just go to a DMV and then come back. Just go to a fucking DMV.
To a DMV. Yeah, I have recently.
It's a terrible fucking experience, isn't it?
It's also a terrible fucking experience doing anything related to like a company. Have you ever like talked to like somebody on Amazon? Like, what the fuck are you talking about?
My argument wasn't,
by the way, they're actually
my argument wasn't Amazon is a paragon of efficiency. My argument was companies tend to be better than the state. I feel like that's a pretty safe argument, to be honest.
Yeah, because you know what companies do? They get rid of people like giving. Like, they don't give a fuck about like the average individual. Yeah, so the state does.
They should care for themselves and their property.
So you think that we should have a governmental system that does not give a fuck about the individual? Why would they even be a government then?
But before we go down that route,
okay.
Yeah,
you're using the collective and the individual, and you're interchanging them by saying that a company demands that they care about all of the people.
I'll put an end. I'll put an end.
Yeah, we get it. You're a commie retard. We got it.
Then I'll give it. I'll
really
give
into like the
back to it. Then I'll
prefer the term commentard. Okay.
Yeah. Well, nice. I'm gonna use that. But no. But it's actually comment. It's actually brilliant. That was awesome.
It's actually good.
But
I like it.
It was pretty good.
I'll admit it. It's good.
The reason I was going down that line of questioning is I think just to illustrate how this is like an incredibly difficult section of where, like, what kind of rules apply, what kind of expectations of privacy apply, and to some extent I fully acknowledge, and it sucks, but like our expectations are going to change a little bit with the with technology. And so when we literally write it in of an expectation of a reasonable expectation of privacy, if no one expects privacy because there's planes and police helicopters flying overhead, especially in a city, or news choppers flying overhead, I think it's easy for us to imagine this like in like a rural setting, like, oh, I'm in my fucking farm. Like, what reason do you have to fly a drone over, my head? But if you live in New York, or if you live in like these areas where like the proposed, drones are being like suggested, these are like metropolitan areas where you have, news choppers, medical choppers, police officers flying overhead at all times. You look up, you're probably going to see something flying in the air. How can you really expect that, like, yeah, I can be naked in my backyard and no one's going to see? They might see. They're right there. They might see. And so the police drones,
so what is
they're responding to a complaint.
Your argument is, as far as I can tell thus far, is, well, there are repeated violations of people's privacy throughout their entire lives in New York City. So it's not really that big a deal if it helps the cops be more efficient at stopping crime if we just increase those rights violations. And you're saying like it's okay, we'll just lose more freedom and more privacy from the police state. Oh, and by the way, I'm a libertarian. Like,
I think
can you
this is one of
explain this to me? Because this sounds
Yeah.
retarded.
Yeah.
Well, can I
So
just clarify something?
yeah.
Like, I just want to ask you a question like this. So, as of right now, like, is it just fair to say that pretty much like in your world, you only have a reasonable expectation of privacy in your own home and nowhere
Yeah.
else? Okay.
For the most part, or like maybe with your own private affects, like maybe inside your vehicle, etc. To some extent, right? In your
Right,
trunk.
but generally speaking, sure. But
Yeah, but like at the same time, like if a cop walks by and like they can look in your back window and you have like 35,000, I'm not gonna make it 8 pounds of coke. All right,
Sure.
more realistic weight.
He-
I
he
don't think you
knows.
can say, well, why were you looking through my window? It's like, bro, you left it right there in the back seat, and the cop is walking up to your car. Did you really expect him not to see it? To some extent, privacy is somewhat like the idea of privacy, the idea of having this thing that other people don't know about, is by itself sort of determined by other people's sensory abilities.
Oh, okay.
In a world in which everybody's blind,
Okay.
we may have very different expectations of privacy.
I have a follow up because this technology is in the pipeline. Are your thoughts private in terms of when you get to the place of like we can actually read your thoughts, let's say through fMRI data, or there's certain brain implants in development now that can translate your thoughts into speech, controlling an avatar. Like this is research right now in development in the pipeline, probably in the next 5-10 years. Are your thoughts like do you have any privacy there?
That's liberal, but fair enough.
No,
But I want to.
Yeah,
I wanna add to what he said.
I don't know if this is happening. Wait, sorry.
I wanna- I just
will
wanted to add.
absolutely
I just
show-
wanted to
I'll put
add
the research
a
in the
sci-fi.
Discord now.
I just
Okay,
wanted to add a sci-fi spin to what he just said, because like I was rewatching Ghost in the Shell, the standalone complex. One great anime, so check it out. But in that future, right, they have like the cybernetic brains are a very common thing, and yes, they will. The police will download your thoughts, right? Like if they get a chance to, they'll download thoughts, and then they were like developing like nanites that would for people. Usually they just like do that for dead people, but like for live people, they would be able to like keep track of their thoughts as they went by. So like I bring that up only because we're talking about technological progression, and like yeah, what are the limits there? So,
We don't know if we'll ever be able to download thoughts, right? That's science fiction.
Well,
That's science fiction to know someone's thoughts. fMRIs, yes, it is.
Not. No,
Yes,
it is.
you're
No,
full of shit. You're engaging in
I'm
science fiction.
Absolutely not. I will
You
literally
are.
post the research. No, so
Post the research. It's wrong. If it makes that claim, it's wrong.
No. If you want to, it depends on what you mean. Like, do you mean download? I don't know about download, but to be able to translate brain activity into actual,
yes. Being able to see,
pretty much,
being able to like functional magnetic resonance imaging, right? Works at its base level of being able to find the iron in blood and seeing which portions of the brain are activated.
I know how.
Right? Okay. Well, I know that I'm not trying to educate you. I'm trying to educate the audience in case they're like, what the fuck are these nerds talking about? Right? So you can see what parts of the brain are activated. And as we get better and better at that and have more and more understanding, we can have a vague sense of what the person might be thinking. But there's no strong evidence, certainly. Maybe there might be some slight evidence to the idea that we'd ever be able to know exactly what you're thinking, especially in real time without you like in a machine. The idea that like when we're talking about reasonable expectation of privacy and the idea of like, can I walk around with a machine that just knows what you're thinking and knows your thoughts? That is hundreds of years in the future, most likely.
Okay, so I put two
If
pieces
at all.
of research. I put 2 pieces of research in the Discord. The title of one paper is Semantic Reconstruction of Continuous Language from Non-Invasive Brain Recordings. It uses literally fMRI in combination with AI, and there is some training to reconstruct language, to restore, the idea is to restore speech to people that do not have or have lost the ability to speak from just straight fMRI and brain activity. And then the other one that I posted in the Discord is a high-performance neural prosthesis for speech decoding and avatar control, where yes, this is a brain implant, so it is invasive, but there's the other one is fMRI, non-invasive, where it's like, yes, through brain activity it's controlling an avatar and restoring speech to those who don't have it. If you say that it's 100 years off, you might be right. Obviously, no one can predict the
Well,
future.
you said 5 to 10 years in the context of like me unknowingly, with no one having any idea, someone just immediately knowing my thoughts. We are not 5 to 10 years away from that, right? Like that's not.
No. If
We've
we
never
can do
said
it,
that.
if we can do it with fMRI, okay, then that is potentially medical information that is like in a chart, okay? And so so is there a reasonable expectation that your fMRI data will never be translated into thoughts?
Okay, but now we're talking about like HIPAA and all kinds of other things, right? We're not talking about like
that's why I asked
walking
the question
around.
to Lectoid of your thoughts.
Yeah. So
Is there a reasonable expectation of privacy?
It doesn't. Okay, I assumed it was within context. It sounds like it wasn't in context. Fair enough.
So okay, yeah. And I like there. So I'm gonna go to Ico next, but like I've the idea that we have implants or something that are allowing people who are who've lost limbs to use like cybernetic limbs, right? We're working on this right now. We've seen a lot of progress on that front. Like, should there be a right to privacy as to like what actions were like done by that limb? Like, if you could download like the history of that limb, and like what
You're
you have
talking
done.
about jerking off, and we all know it.
Absolutely, right. And after you choke the chicken,
Don't give
maybe
Sister Mary that technology. I'll be in big trouble.
after you choke the chicken, you might have choked your wife, though, right? And so, like, in a police investigation, she wouldn't stop walking in on you. So it had to happen. But like, in an investigation,
Sister
it'd be
Mary would be
fair
less
to like download like the commands sent to right?
The problem is every power that you give the police is a power that will be abused, without a doubt. No matter there's no exception. Like it is, the police have proven themselves as an institution over and over and over again to abuse any authority that you give them, and they don't have any authority to begin with. They're an illegitimate occupying force. And so the question is why would you give them those things?
Okay, so we might be 5 to 10 or 100 years away from the stuff that you guys have been talking about, but we are 0 years away from something else that's very similar to it, and it's not new technology at all. I have a friend who's a police detective, has been in that business for decades, and he can tell. He's tested it on me and on other people around me before. It's kind of uncanny. He can tell when somebody's lying based on the training that he's received about their. Now, I'm not saying with 100% accuracy, okay, but they have. All right,
lie to me.
Body language, sort of evasion detection, like behavioral training that they've got. I don't like so. To me, that's not fundamentally a difference in kind. Maybe this new technology would be more accurate, and certainly something like evasion training wouldn't be admissible in court. But it would certainly affect whether or not a police officer decides to go ahead in one direction or another direction based on. On what they think that they're seeing based on their behavioral training.
Right. It's another example of like a.
Now.
Yeah, it's another example of a means by which we give a poorly scientifically grounded, training course to some police officers that has nowhere near the accuracy it needs to actually be effective, and then we utilize as an excuse to get around, the Fourth Amendment rights, like as we do with so many other ways, to the point where your Fourth Amendment rights basically don't exist.
Like drug dogs saying they detect something in a car,
or like plain view doctrine, or like all of these or egress laws. Like there's so many ways in which the Fourth Amendment has just been whittled away over the past 70 years that it might as well not fucking exist. Like, what the fuck is the point of a warrant? Like, how many police interactions even still use them?
I want to talk about that though, the point of a warrant. But Corey, please.
Yeah. So pushing this further, especially with the technological aspect, and like with your thoughts, so even if we get to the point of just to be able to record your brain activity and read your thoughts with a brain implant, there's going to be people that have brain implants. Okay, so and that is potentially hackable, or you can find a way in. So again, would the police have a right to just check in with your thoughts of hey, there's an expression of concern? Like, well, let's see what's going on in Lactoid's mind. Is that an open door for you?
No. So,
but why is there a reasonable expectation of privacy there now that there's a brain implant?
So my theory on privacy, it really privacy is difficult to navigate, and a lot of things are justified under the right to privacy that don't actually make a lot of sense. And there's a lot of things that should be private that probably aren't. Um, my conception of privacy is whether or not somebody has a reasonable expectation of privacy is based on whether or not somebody actually has to make an affirmative effort to look into you to determine it, right? To find it, right? If they have to go into your house to find the shit in your house, that probably means you have a reasonable expectation of privacy in your house because they actually have to target you to get up to go in there to see it. If they have to target your brain to go in and see it, then I think you have a reasonable expectation of privacy in your brain. I don't think you have a reasonable expectation of privacy in your front yard because there's a lot of people can discover things about your business there tangentially, right? Like, you can reductio all the way to the mind, but you could reductio the opposite, right? Like, let me ask you a question, Corey. Should I have a right to privacy of me standing in my front lawn in front of the street jerking off? Do I have a right to privacy there?
Corey, please imagine this and answer. Go ahead.
and if so, why not? It's my property.
Only in my sweetest dreams, Lactoid. But no, intuitively, no, you don't have a reasonable expectation. But I agree with you. Like, it is gray, and like that's why I think I made it clear from my opening statement of like this is like a gray area for me. Of like I don't know exactly where the line is. And that's why it's like, well, I would just like make it fair of like if the police can now spy on people, well then the people can spy on the police. That's
no, for sure. I'm fine with that. I think all cops should have body cams at all times. I think police activity should be public knowledge. I mean, they are officers of the public, ideally, right? So why they have to keep things secret? Unless I guess there's a specific I'm not going to make an undercover cop where that might be different. Okay, but for most operations,
giant body cam.
Yeah. For most operations. But
it's amazing. It's amazing how like you won't require it for every police officer, and then magically every inner city is going to have 3, 4, 5 units of plain clothes, drug cops that don't need cameras because it's a bullshit idea that you can regulate police. The only way you regulate police is to fucking abolish them.
Okay, so I understand.
Put them into the market.
Well, I understand you have
stop giving them power.
I understand under your position of abolish the police, any kind of giving police cars would be like an invasion of privacy because then they might drive by someone's backyard and see people, which is true, right?
The police have no right to exist.
They have no right to. I get it. If you want to go down all the way to the fucking
spot, he says.
Abolish the police. You're consistent. Fine, I understand, right? Just get rid of them, and then we don't talk about any powers they may have.
Right. But when we are talking,
because they don't have any powers. But we're talking.
When you claim to be a libertarian, and then you at the same time you are fucking playing apologia for the police state as a means of giving them additional powers to violate people's rights, I respond with "fuck you."
Brother, you can be a libertarian and want cops.
An expansion of the police state. All right, cool. Then you can be a libertarian and you could be a hardcore socialist and you could be a communist libertarian or you could be a fascist libertarian. You could be all of a sudden libertarian means not a goddamn thing.
I just want to point out one thing. Scott's obviously got a new nemesis in Lactoid.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
You're not my nemesis. I'm just calling you out on your bullshit.
Yeah. Look, so you have this idea. My biggest issue here is not with
I have this crazy idea. Don't expand the police state.
Hold up. My issue is not with actually the enforcement of laws. My issue is usually the laws themselves, right? So having police officers and having police drones and shit would be great if the only laws that existed were like laws against murder, rape, violence, like where you can identify a victim. You can have the police intervene. That's a good thing, and we want police to be effective in those situations. The issue, and where I will agree with you, is we don't want the cops coming after people for bullshit crimes. But this seems to be less of an issue with the cops being able to enforce the law through cars or police helicopters or drones or whatever. And this appears to be more a problem of we have laws against marijuana, which is you're telling you're directing a tool to do a bad thing when you could not do that, right? That's like the angle I'm coming at here, because
Yeah, the problem is that you're
if
treating
you
police officers like
Scott,
robots.
wait, hold on. Let me explain.
What
Let
you
me ask
said
you a
is
question.
false.
Let me ask you a question. Let's say they roll out like an expanded drone program and it lowers robberies by 80%. Now you have 80% fewer people getting robbed, which you both agree is an aggression. Okay, is this a good thing?
All right, so I'll answer your question in a moment. Promise that I'll answer.
Restraint, right?
Okay. So the first thing I would say is you're treating police officers as if they're robots, which is to say that the institution of the police isn't also corrupt and a problem, regardless of the laws that are given to them. That there aren't wealthy individuals that become friends with the mayor that then go to the chief of police, and all of a sudden we have a new crackdown program to fuck over a bunch of black people because they happen to be living in an area where some rich guy is able to fucking hopefully drive out areas so that they can put up new businesses and things like that. The institution is corrupt at its core, and it's not just the laws are bad. There are other problems. That's number one. Number two, if the drone program reduced robberies by 80%, I would still be against it because it is an expansion of an illegitimate force. And I would wonder two things. Number one, what other things were given up as a means of stopping robberies by 80%? What unreported things? What are the unintended consequences of this program? And in the future, what are the unintended consequences of an increase in the police state? Because what I would say is that even if you choose to look at this from a consequentialist lens, right, which is this idea that like, it's 80% better, or it's, or it's only 20% of the crime, so therefore it must be good, is there are incalculable things that I think eventually will turn into horrors, because that's what happens when you constantly bend over and let the state fuck you in the ass and then go, but I'm a good boy because marijuana laws are bad, and then eventually you get into a position where you go, fuck man, where'd this fascism come from? Fuck man, I what happened? Hopefully I can flee to one of these other countries. You put your fucking line in the sand now.
If this is just going to become like an argument of like abolish the police or nothing, right? Like either you're going to abolish the police, otherwise, you're going to descend into fascism. Then I guess I don't know where to go from here, because
this is not an argument. That's not my argument. My argument is very simple, right, and very reasonable, which is do not give the police expanded powers.
Yeah, why buy them new cars?
And as our society becomes more complex, and as the police become less effective at their fucking jobs, increase opportunities for private agencies to pick up the slack. Eventually, we won't need the police. Private companies would be far better at it.
Are you opposed to buying? Are you opposed to buying police officers new vehicles?
Yes. I'm opposed to taxation. The fuck? I'm an actual libertarian.
Lactoid. And this, other people can jump in on this as well. But I wanted to go back on what Scott said previously about like what's the point of a warrant. So like as of now, do you think like a police officer should have to have a warrant to search your backyard, right? Like if it's fenced off.
Well, this whole drone program would assume that they don't.
A police officer on the ground. I'm just asking.
Well, yeah, because for sure. So my conception of warrants is that you should have to have a warrant to go into any place in which somebody has a reasonable expectation of privacy or their private property. So otherwise, it's trespass, right? Unless you have a reason to be on somebody else's property, like signed by a judge. If you walk on somebody else's property, you're trespassing. So you shouldn't be able to do that.
Okay. So, but if you fly over their property, you're thinking this is different.
Of course, because shit's flying over our property all the time.
So, like, can we?
How does this apply to plain view doctrine?
Can we say that the state's actions
in plain view to a drone,
right?
If it's in plain view to a drone, what if the drone has got infrared cameras now? And has AI technology to fly over your house and can extrapolate from heat mapping.
If it's infrared, it's not. This has already been decided. If it's infrared, it's no longer plain view, right? Because now the question is, it's not tangential. So it has to be
human eyesight.
Yeah, well, again, tangential to like.
Yeah, I didn't know that. That's fine.
It's got to be. It's not the only reason infrared was out of bounds was because that wasn't a reasonable expectation, and I think like a flying person is also not reasonable. Right, like I think
It's in plain view of Superman. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
Wait. A helicopter's not
flying
reasonable?
low enough to like see at that resolution, like sort of casually without looking at it. That would be the standard, and I don't think
a news chopper. What are we talking about? News choppers fly over all the time.
Yeah,
Like,
but I don't know for sure. But
surveyors.
Not at that level of altitude.
I don't think.
Yes,
most
at that level of
people-
altitude, or if you live by a hospital, like shit flies over all the time. Yeah, they can look
You're
down
telling
and
me
see
that
you.
a helicopter can fly like 30 feet over your house.
30 feet. You,
Why do
hold
we
on.
not think
I don't know
about
how bad your eyesight is, Lyko, but you can see beyond 30 feet.
Not
at
in
least,
that
at
same
least I
level of
can.
resolution.
I can see pretty clearly at several hundred feet.
I'm saying 30 feet is what a drone would be doing, but a helicopter would be much higher than that.
Okay, so at what altitude now does it become?
Like, are you going to be able to identify a person based on the altitude that your average helicopter is flying? I don't think you can.
Of course you
I
can.
mean, unless they have their name like printed on top of it.
You don't think a news helicopter or like a medical chopper or a police chopper, you don't think that they fly close enough to see people?
Yeah, I mean, like, we see this.
I just think it's funny.
Yeah.
You're literally just making my argument for me
it's-
that reasonable expectation of privacy is a retarded standard of a Band-Aid, that the only one that works is private property and private property
everything
rights.
that makes sense. I get it, but like I'm saying, like the
What?
FAA has certain permissions
Listen,
that you
honey.
you can only fly to a certain level with their permission.
Okay, then Lactoid, if what you're saying is true, which I absolutely dispute, but if what you're saying is true, then we don't need
It's
drones,
common
right?
sense. Wait. What? So you're
We'll just
right.
fly one helicopter
Yeah. If we had the
above
resources,
the city, and it can see into every backyard. Like
this
for
was my
miles.
intro. You're literally describing my intro, right? The reason why people have like, if New York was like, hey, we're gonna like fly choppers around, which they do, like we're gonna fly choppers around to answer complaints, like that wouldn't be anything new. It would just be a lot more expensive because flying a chopper is incredibly expensive. And so by having drones, they cut the cost by some 100, times.
Well, it's expensive.
And so now
but
they're
it also has much lower
I
resolution.
didn't realize you were the.
No, it has nothing to do with resolution. It has to do with cost, right? So if you can fly
Well,
drones,
chopper.
if you can fly drones, you're saving so much more money,
It's
and
cost,
so you
it's
can
scale, and
respond.
it's resolution.
Like
it's all of those.
You can Google right now high-speed police chase, and they have these choppers that fly around and they follow the cars, and you can sometimes even see the people in the
I understand
cars.
that. I understand that they have a reason
we
to
don't pay
follow
for
that car.
Those are not police based. Generally,
They are police.
No, they're not. They're news based.
They can easily
They can be
police.
both.
Oh, I'm sorry. Well,
I know this is crazy. The police have technology that the news agencies have. I know, it's wild. They both have helicopters.
Right,
They
but
both-
okay, so the example you
technology
gave
exists,
earlier, the example you gave earlier was, hey, I can see it on your dashboard. I didn't have to go looking for it, right? But with something like a drone, you're specifically looking for something. You're not just it's not just that your drone just happens to be flying over somebody's backyard and then you found it. That's what reasonable expectation of privacy means. It means that some neighbor is going to randomly see it whether they want to or not. But here we're talking about something that goes far beyond that, right? There is no reasonable expectation of privacy in those other situations because people who are walking by not even looking for it will be confronted with that visual. But but that's not the case with these drones. They're actually having to seek something out. In fact, in the novel Dune, they actually call it a hunter-seeker. Like it's actually looking for a specific thing.
So this is just, I don't know. Okay, everything reminds everybody of Minority Report. Whenever we talk, we would say the police get power. So when I want to like, again, like
it's almost like there's an intuition to like not trust these fucks.
Yes,
the cops are driving. The cops are driving past your house. All right, and they look over and they see, or sorry, they're driving past my house and they see me in the front yard, like flipping them off, right? Or they see me in the front yard, like with a gun, like waving it at people, like doing something that's like pretty clearly illegal. Okay, and I'm
in Canada,
and I'm right there in the front yard doing it. Now, all of you would say, well, that's obviously you don't have the reasonable expectation of privacy. This cop is just driving along doing his business, and then he looks over and like he sees you, right? You know, did he turn his head and look at you? Sure, but like, I mean, that would be completely unreasonable to expect a cop not to do that. I'm telling you, there are helicopters that fly low enough to where if you looked out of the helicopter, you could look down and you could see people. In fact, there are court cases about this in which like the courts have found like repeatedly, like a helicopter who's flying and like they look down and they see like a marijuana grow, like they see all these like big plots where they're growing marijuana, that's not a violation of your Fourth Amendment protections. They look at that and they say, hey, there's pot. We see it now. Now we're going to come get it, right?
Right, because they weren't looking for it. I mean, that's literally the Fourth Amendment literally says.
Yes.
No, I mean, no, the ATF does that shit all the time.
Wait. I go. Let me agree with you.
Wait,
Let me agree with you.
Okay.
I think that if the police are ever going to go looking for something on somebody's property, like they should need to have a warrant. Okay, but if they're just going
It's
about
literally the
normally
prompt.
if they're just going about
Right.
The prompt is that someone calls and they're doing an investigation.
Maybe I shouldn't have used the word warrant, but like
Yeah,
they should.
maybe you shouldn't have been proven fucking wrong. Like,
No,
All right,
maybe
I get it. Yeah, we can. All
I probably misstated the word warrant. Okay.
Okay, but the reason I
Hold on,
wanted
real quick. Investigation, right? The police officers should only be going to investigate something if they receive a complaint or if they have some belief that like something illegal is afoot. They shouldn't just be like doing that normally. Okay. But like this case is they're only sending the drones if they get a complaint. And second of all, like again, if you have a helicopter flying overhead doing otherwise normal business, and by the way, patrol officers, like they just literally drive around patrolling, like, and if they see some shit happening, then they go arrest them. Do you want to eliminate patrols, Aiko?
Okay. All right. Let me meet you halfway because I think maybe there is some middle ground here. Because if what you're saying is you cannot establish probable cause with one of these things, rather you have to already have probable cause before you could then send a drone. Is that what you're saying?
I'm not even sure about that because again, we have police officers that patrol streets in cars. They don't have probable cause, yet they are looking in everyone's front yard.
Right, because that's the whole point. Like, so what I was trying to say about the Fourth Amendment
Couldn't
is
they patrol the air?
The reason why the Fourth Amendment is about warrantless searches. Warrant is just another word for a reason. If they can't search unless they have a reason, that's what the Fourth Amendment protects against. Then you've got to view that drone much in the same way as the random passerby or even a cop just walking by an open window where something suspicious is happening.
Right.
And then seeing that suspicious thing without looking for it, right? Warrantless, without reason, then you have probable cause, then you take the next step.
This is so disheartening to see my presumed libertarian brother pushing forward the dialectic. It's literally just the dialectic here. It's there are these contradictions, but don't worry because we need the police and we'll just analyze and then we'll synthesize the contradictions. Oh, and by the way, we recognize that reasonable expectation of privacy and all these things are actually based off current technology and like it will get more and more authoritarian as time goes on. But don't worry about it because cops need more fucking power.
Gonna go on for?
Okay.
As long enough as it takes your retarded brain to catch on.
Aiko, here's what I'll say.
Infinity, apparently.
We might, you're right. We might be all night. It's all right.
Aiko, I don't see a substantial, and I would like you to explain, or somebody here to explain to me the substantial difference, like in principle, the difference between a police and a cop car patrolling a neighborhood and looking in people's front yards, and the police flying a drone looking in people's backyards.
Well, the difference is the fence, right? The difference is there's something that causes a citizen to have a reasonable expectation of privacy. And if it's in your front yard, you would expect that anybody walking by would see it.
Well, hold on. But what if they don't have a fence? What if I don't have a fence?
Well, then you don't need a drone. Just
okay. Well, hold on.
Car down the alleyway, you'll see it.
Yeah, fence then would be comparable here to awning, right? If you want to say, well, if you want privacy in your yard, just build a fence. I could say, well, if you want privacy in your yard, just build an awning covering.
Yeah, that's why I said things might change in the future. It might be that everyone's like flying around on jetpacks in the future, in which case, yeah, it would be reasonable to expect that someone's going to fly over your backyard.
The reasonable expectation of privacy doesn't matter in the case for the prompt.
Yeah, I understand.
Because the prompt is it's an investigation. So if police officers were called and they're presuming that they're investigating a presumed crime, in most states, they're going to be able to check out your fucking backyard or like look over your fence anyways. The only thing that this is doing is giving cops more power to be able to do more investigations so they can potentially catch more crimes or harass more people or fuck over more people or ruin more people's lives as cops are wanting to do. And I'm simply saying that the libertarian position is to not give additional powers to the police state.
Right, and that's that very last
But the
part,
reasonable
that
expectation of
part-
privacy really isn't that big of a deal here because they're investigating a crime.
Yeah, it's that last part. It's the additional powers part that I'm just trying to find the limiting principle with Lactoid, because it sounds like he's going beyond the prompt. It sounds like he's saying he's comfortable not just with doing this when you already have probable cause, in which case you already have a lot of other tools at your disposal, but where he's actually trying to go to a new place where you can just start looking at everybody's backyards going on a fishing expedition.
Yeah,
And that's the part
curious.
Which is absolutely how it will be used.
So like Lactoid, if we get to the, like, I'm gonna bring in Star Trek. If we get to the point of like Geordie LaForge eyes, where like you could just like so, and that implant exists, like, is there limitations there now? Like, because now you can just look
If
around.
if everybody can just see through everything, I suppose. I haven't actually watched that scene.
Or no, like this is now just like you know, some people have it and some people won't have it, and like it just happens like a police officer has this, just as casually Geordie LaForge has Geordie LaForge eyes, and so it's like, well, should there
The
be
context is he was blind, and he was able to see.
Thank you.
Context.
Yeah, I'm aware.
Lactoid said Lactoid. No, I'm saying Lactoid said he didn't know.
I didn't know. Yeah.
He had special X-ray glasses that could.
Okay, he had the X-ray specs, sure.
Well, it was also like in the like Next Generation TV show, it was like a visor, but it evolved into like his eyes were like implants.
It's a tough question. It's a tough question,
Right.
Corey. Can I ask you, if let's say you had like a leper colony where everyone's gone blind, when you walk in with sight, are you violating all their privacies?
Yeah, that's a fair question. I don't have
If
an
they've
answer.
never heard of a sighted person and then you don't tell them that you're a sighted person, then yeah, I think at some point it does become a violation.
No, I tell them I'm
because
sighted, but I just keep looking at them though.
Privacy is not a fucking right. It is a thing that we have constructed because the state is an all-encompassing leviathan that abuses people. So we have created a human right that doesn't exist.
Say that privacy is not a right.
Name a major libertarian theorist that says so. Stephen Kinsella is against it.
I don't
right?
care. I don't think that
Hoppe,
being a libertarian means
Rothbard.
I have to say something of a libertarian theorist. You base all of your
That is
opinions
the
off of what
libertarian
other people
position.
Tell you, so you're not an individual. That's not very libertarian of you.
Not
That's
He's part of the Borg. Now we're on the Star Trek kick. Let's do that.
I don't get to have I don't get to have my
I'm
own
not pure enough
personal
for the Borg,
logic.
apparently.
I don't get to have my own personal logic. Okay, it fucking exists dependent of my existence or not. Right?
His
The
distinctiveness will
idea
be added to our own.
the idea that like you actually have privacy rights. The privacy rights only exist insofar as we like them, but that doesn't make it an actual right. That just means that we like them and we want something, and we recognize that the state does things that we don't like and does it all of the fucking time. So we have created this idea of privacy rights. The problem is, as we've shown on this panel over and over and over again, is that they don't actually make logical sense. What it is we don't like we have a concept of privacy. And we don't like it when people are in our privacy. And we especially don't like it when cops that fuck people over and are bad people constantly invade our privacy. But we don't mind the newscaster, right? We don't mind the helicopter up in the sky because it doesn't really interact with our day-to-day life. We don't really feel violated by that. But when I'm at the fucking cookout, right? And I'm like, fuck yeah. I brought chairs. I was finally invited to the Black Cookout. You know what I mean? I wasn't allowed to bring food, but I brought chairs. Like, we're good. We're having a good time. You know, I'm trying not to dance because I'll get in trouble. Nobody wants to see that, right? And then all of a sudden, fucking technology is above us. All of a sudden, I feel violated, and everyone there feels like their rights have been violated because we don't fucking like that. But the real rights violation is the fucking existence of the police, not this idea that like technology can see into our backyard. If you want to fix that, then you need a community that voluntarily creates rules that fix that.
Can I ask, maybe, like, what's actually, like, even though it states that in the Constitution, right to privacy, but like how it's actually
It doesn't state
functional.
that.
It doesn't.
There are
Okay.
5 amendments in the Bill of Rights, all of which
The
are
penumbra.
argued to imply a right to privacy, like
Yeah.
unreasonable search and seizure,
Unreasonable search
or
and seizure.
not having to
The
testify against
American
yourself, all this
Pentateuch.
kind of-
No,
Right,
you're
yeah, yeah.
absolutely right. I botched that. I do apologize. You're right about that. I'm sorry. But
It's an arguable point.
yeah. But so even our conception of it is a reasonable right to privacy, but like and that's like meaning that like the state like should respect this idea of privacy. Like we have a reasonable right of the state not like looking into our lives, right? If that's like the formulation, maybe what it actually is like the individual has the responsibility of reasonable countermeasures.
No, it's
right.
So
So like,
what is?
hold on, let me finish.
Okay.
Let me finish right. So like, the basic countermeasure is the house, right? Anything inside of it, if you put something inside there that we expect that to be private. In the case of your backyards, it was the privacy fence, right?
You know what?
Then,
Let me build an EMP device on the top of my and a what is it, Hatterday? I can't think of the name of like EMP protection for your house. And every time a fucking drone,
Faraday cage.
Faraday cage, and let me just pop that bitch every time a drone gets by. And if I don't get in trouble for that, have your fucking drones. But I'm pretty sure I'm going to go to jail.
But I'm saying, like, what if like the next thing would be that like, and I'm sure of course, because we love capitalism here, right, that someone would provide a covering that would go over your backyard, right? That's like permeable and everything.
It's called an awning. Yeah,
no, I mean like the whole thing, I mean,
yeah, like
right?
a big awning. You could.
So
hold on. Well, a big awning covered your entire backyard. I mean, like basically like a bubble. There's no awnings that cover.
They got them. They got them.
Well, it depends how small your.
They're super expensive
compared to how big the awning is. But I'm sure it's not like not. I'm sure you could find someone who could build you this. Yeah.
Okay, all right, let me just finish this, please.
Go ahead.
So there is like the awning, right? The big ass awnings that apparently have that I've never seen. But also, like if we get to Joy of the Forge Eyes or whatever, that like you would have to have like infrared countermeasures in your home. That like with your computers, it's that your data was easily accessible because maybe you put it out there. You put it out there even on a private server, and then that server was hacked or whatever, and the onus is actually on you for countermeasures. Is that actually the world that we live in, rather than a reasonable right to privacy?
I mean, like the logic of that statement is it's your fault the police shot and killed you because you should have been wearing body armor. Right, like you should have had a reasonable countermeasure to the police actions, right? Like,
so I'm not saying it's right. I'm just saying is that the world that we actually live in?
That's just the reality.
Is that like a better way of looking at it?
Until such a time that the state just makes what you're doing illegal, right? Once it becomes acceptable, then your countermeasures against what most people find to be reasonable become illegality, right? I mean, if you do things to such a degree that not enough people care. Right. So, for example, like collecting rainwater is illegal in a large part of the United States because California might not get enough fucking water for their almond trees. So all of a sudden they need to make it illegal for farmers to catch their fucking water so that Monsanto or some other fucking corporation can come in and buy up all the mom and pop, places that are, that can't afford to actually irrigate their property, like whatever. Right. Like if something isn't popular, most people don't care about it, then they'll just fucking make it illegal if it's a countermeasure against them. But if it becomes something that most people get used to, then people just accept it. Like there was a time in American history, right, where police officers didn't get to go walk on your front porch. There was a large large time, all before 1940s, 1930s, 1920s, 1910s.
My front yard.
Right? Like if you were somebody, you could pull out your shotgun and say, "You're on my property one more time and you're getting shot. Where's your fucking warrant?" And then they were like, "Well, I don't have a warrant." And they go, "Okay, well, you're on my property. I'm going to blow your fucking brains off if you don't get out." And the cops would fucking leave. And then all of a sudden we just have these kind of like these convenient expansions that make cops' jobs easier, because like, what if you're a wife beater, right? And like someone's screaming for help, but you can't hear it from the street. Right? You're probably those statistics are actually mostly bullshit, but fair enough. Like they are a little bit worse than the average person. Yeah, you don't know how to read data. It's okay. We've been through this before. But regardless, right? Once people get comfortable with rights violations, they just become the standard, and then countermeasures against that will be illegal.
What do you guys think? Thank you for that, Scott. Yeah, like about my formulation. Do you think it was
the giant awning formulation? Then I agree with you. It's the reality.
I think it's reasonable.
I agree with you. It's the reality of this. I don't like the situation, but it seems like we're inching closer and closer to that world, and I lean towards Scott's side in this scenario. Like, I don't know. Further expansion is the answer.
Go ahead, Aiko.
Yeah, so since we're talking about sci-fi, except we're gonna ban Minority Report because it's overused. There's another sci-fi novel, an Alfred Bester novel, The Star's My Destination, where people have like gained the ability to teleport places, and as a result, in order to protect themselves, they have to make the insides of their houses mazes, and you cannot allow. You know this book, Prime, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah. You cannot allow the schematics of your house to be known. Otherwise, like bad things can happen to you because people can teleport. Well, it just so happens that, like we were talking about the Fourth Amendment before, and the part that everybody knows is about was the Fourth Amendment, whichever one, the that you cannot have unreasonable search and seizures, right? But then in the last part of it, it says that that house cannot be described. So the very fact that like it can be known what that place looks like is unconstitutional. So I think that addresses directly what you're talking about there, that you can't that's like an awning covering your place, or having a maze, undescribed inside of your place. We literally have the right for those places not to be described.
That's similar things with like screened in front porch, right? Like a police officer, if like they come into your screened in front porch uninvited, they're technically trespassing. So even if they see something in your living room, but they see it from your closed screened in front porch, then a lot of times, if you have the money and you have a good defense, you can get that thrown out of court if they happen
literally
to
the
see
Fourth
something.
Amendment ends with, and particularly describing the place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized.
So I'm curious because again, I'm Canadian, but I don't know how it works in the United States. But like, how are tinted windows treated, especially with cars in the United States? Like, can you have pretty much?
They're illegal in most states.
So you're allowed to have them tinted up to a certain level, depending on the jurisdiction.
So long as the cops can see in your vehicle, because if you
so
stop
the
them from
argument they
doing that-
use, if we're being most charitable, the argument they use is that if you tint it beyond a certain level, it becomes unsafe in terms of just being able to see at night. That's their argument.
But we know that's not true, and the technology is not going to hold up there.
That's their argument, right?
Right.
But you can tint, like, up until they determine it to be a safety risk, you can tint your windows.
And then the cops will lie about like how tinted your windows actually are.
Right.
They have like
well,
a meter or
cops
something
lie.
for that.
That's just
because cops are liars.
because they are allowed to.
Do cops also eat hot chip?
So another example
What?
of like how we're okay with
Where,
like material being permeated, I guess, in our house is, if let's say you got these great big old windows on the front of your house, and inside, like you're beating your wife or something, and a cop walks by, like it's happening it is happening within your house. Like, do you think that you have a reasonable expectation of privacy, or if you wanted that privacy, maybe you should have closed your curtains?
Well, it also depends on how far away you are from society. Are you downtown, or are you in a mountainous region and like your
Why
closest
isn't that-
neighbor is a mile away? Because that actually
Then what-
matters, right? If someone has to use a telescopic lens in order to see through that window, then that would violate. Then that would
So you're
violate.
saying
the
I'm
idea.
saying your
all of
average.
those crimes being like done if you are just like private enough. Like I don't understand what your
What?
logic is on this.
We're not talking
No,
about a
it's not
crime
talking
being
about
committed.
crime.
Maybe I don't understand what Lactoid's point is, but like
It was to Prime's point about like if like
mhm,
like countermeasures, right? So like if you want to infrared,
sure.
infrared proof your house, if it gets to that point,
Mhm.
and which by the way, Kylo did talk a lot about. Like one of the primary reasons was because the technology was not in the general public use, and in fact, there's some question
It
about
just
whether or
seems
not
like
if
the
it
better
did
way
become
of
into
like
public use, whether or not that would change. It
getting
might.
getting away with crimes. It just seems like okay, like whatever. Like yeah, people should be able to especially if something happened to them. Like I just feel like it's
Nina,
very kind of
Yeah.
silly.
no. What Prime said is like, okay, so we have this idea of like, well, if you
Mhm.
don't want people to look in your backyard, build a fence. Okay, because that's why people are walking, driving, et cetera, et
Because
cetera.
you're doing crimes, I
Like
assume.
we don't want people to look in our backyard now when there's flying machines. Build an awning.
Right.
Oh, we don't want people to look into our
Mhm.
house, like our house, with when they have like Geordie glasses or whatever. Like put some kind of
Mhm.
screening in front, right? Like there is some like because privacy. Actually, I somewhat agree with Scott that privacy is not a
Well,
right.
this conversation is just like how
But
can I cover up my
like,
crimes though? I
no,
mean,
no, it's
obviously,
not
I think
about
that's
covering your
what.
crimes. It's definitely not about
I
that. But
mean,
like,
Nina, I
Well,
agree with you.
like
Look,
you're
if you have
saying.
nothing to hide, you shouldn't fear the cops. I agree.
exactly.
God.
Oh, I mean, you should
Oh,
never fear
God.
the cops. Don't get me wrong.
Just to piss Scott off, okay, of
The
course. But
cops.
but
Well,
like, yeah,
Lactoid,
I was looking for a
like,
bigger reaction, but
yeah, I really think like the more I think about it, like it really seems like that's the society we're living in, right? Because like to the normal person, like to a jury, if you say that, well, I have a reasonable right to have privacy in my backyard, and then you have no fence, right? And like
Well,
the people around you don't have a fence,
Juries
right?
are retarded, right?
Yeah,
Just
that's
but like
true.
so
That's
like
We're
true.
all dumb. Yes.
it seems like the de facto rule is de facto is that what I'm looking for? Or is it de jure? Anyway, like the de facto
Sure.
rule is that like you have to actually take measures, right? Like if we're saying that the home is like the place that can't be violated, that's because you put it in whatever the item is. You put it in
Because there's
your
a
home.
wall. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a wall,
but then
right?
what's right? But then what Scott just described to us is that like it then becomes illegal to close your curtains, right? Because the tinted windows and all that. Like, so if
Oh, yeah.
if we get to the point where you're not allowed, for the same reason
Well,
you're not
Scott's
allowed
like
to
a
tint your windows, you're
doomer.
not allowed to have that awning. You're not allowed.
I'm not
to
a
close
doomer.
the
That's
curtains.
literally the
hold on,
fucking
hold on.
law of the land.
No, hold on. They justify the tinted windows thing
Would
again
we be
for a
okay
safety
with shooting
concern.
down the drone?
The curtain thing isn't really.
Well,
Yeah,
Lactoid,
but you know what?
Lactoid.
Safety
Okay.
concerns are
We
BS.
can talk
though.
about that later.
Yeah,
but
well,
go
you
ahead.
know
What
that's
did you say?
bullshit.
I mean,
Yeah.
if you got pitch black
No,
windows
what
and
is
you're
bullshit?
driving when like in a dark road, I mean, it's probably gonna obscure your vision a little bit.
There's
More than a little bit.
one-way tinting, right? That'll
Yeah,
obscure
there's
in,
absolutely-
but
It's
not
not
out.
completely one way.
No, there's
okay?
totally like in development now, if not zero, like the tinting of like pretty much 100% see through, but pretty much opaque on the outside. Like it's
That should be
it's
totally
there.
legal. That
Wait,
should be
you know what?
totally
You know
legal.
what? If
But
you
it's
don't
not.
believe that it's bullshit, here's what we'll do. Right? We will go somewhere and we will look at different
You're gonna
shades
go
of
on a
tinting.
diatribe. I know. I know
Okay?
what you're gonna do.
And
but
we'll just
I
hang
wanna-
out in the
Scott,
car.
Let's
And
let Scott finish, and then you can
Scott,
go
do
your
you
diatribe.
think
We'll hang
Let
out.
Scott-
We'll
let
hang
Scott
out in the
finish,
car.
Let Scott finish.
Do you think
We'll
you should
hang
have
out.
sound
We'll
Oh my
we'll
god, I
hang.
got the mute.
We'll hang out in the
Should
car.
you be able
Right?
to shoot
Oh my
the
god,
sound
sorry. I've just got it at the mute. Sorry, go ahead.
I'll be real quick. We'll hang out in a car in a summer day, right? And we'll see what level of tinting we need on a bright summer day where we need sunglasses in our fucking car with the maximum allowed tinting. And then we can just talk about how bullshit this is. You know what I mean? Like you're playing devil's advocate. I get it, but you know that it's bullshit, and you know that they
I'm
create the
not.
laws in such a way for you fucking lying.
I just said
I
just said I literally before you went on this, I just said if it's true, this is maybe just my ignorance of the technology. If it's true, there's like a tint that makes it completely opaque, like looking in, but that you can look out. Like,
here's
with
one
no,
of two
with,
things.
Hold
One of two
on,
things.
with no obstruction, then I'm totally fine with it. Yeah.
One or two. Either A, you are lying just to play devil's advocate and you're full of shit, or B, you are the whitest motherfucker in the world that's like tinted windows. No, you get sunglasses and you make sure you can see through. Like, come the fuck out of here.
Wait, when I put on
Nina wants to yell at
sunglasses,
me.
like it's darker. Am I fucking wrong? Like
What?
Is it when I put on sunglasses, it's not just like regular glasses. It like gets darker.
No, I'm saying that it's illegal to tint your windows to such a degree where you still will need sunglasses because of how bright it is, and you can't tint your fucking windows, which defeats half the fucking purpose.
Shouldn't it therefore be illegal to wear sunglasses while driving then, hypothetically?
Dude, if they made that a law, dude, I would love if cops had to follow it. I would love if cops had to follow that shit.
I would, yeah. It's like if that logic holds true.
Of course,
like,
they don't follow laws, so it doesn't matter.
Actually, it should be illegal to wear sunglasses at night, to quote the song.
Yeah, and I agree. I agree with you, Corey.
Will you please
Honestly,
unmute Nina? Like,
no, wait, Corey. I 100% agree. Like, for me, the only justification possible would be like a safety thing, and if that doesn't exist or if it's being overstated, then I would change the law for sure.
Okay, but yeah,
and then I would agree with you guys that
it is absolutely BS. That tint of opaque but see-through is totally there.
Sure, change it. Change the law. You're not going to get any pushback from me.
By the way, Fabian, I was going to yell lactoid. I just forgot what I was going to say.
You're just going to yell his name randomly? Okay, all right.
Short-term memory loss.
I do it seductively. What?
I was like, you've only been for the one lady in the doesn't seem very sexist at all.
And by the way, like the privacy shit, again, like it is applied all over the fucking place. So, for example, and in fact, half the country firmly supports this. You apparently have the right to privacy in terms of possessing estrogen and progesterone, but you don't have the right to privacy when it comes to possessing fentanyl. Why? I don't fucking know. That's just what the law is.
Privacy when it comes to fentanyl?
Yeah, you don't have any right to privacy when it comes to possessing fentanyl, but you do have a right to privacy when it comes to possessing progesterone.
Oh, we'll see.
Yeah, because the state's stupid and full of contradictions. No one is defending your right to own fentanyl because the Republicans want to like fucking send drones to Mexico and start World War III every other fucking day in order to stop it because they can't imagine just stopping the fucking drug war. And the Democrats aren't going to die on the hill of like buy your fentanyl. So that right doesn't exist. Whereas with estrogen and, HRT and estradiol and all of these other hormones, one, they do have some legitimate medical uses outside of the entire conversation of trans stuff.
So does fentanyl though, right?
Again, like you're libertarian.
Yeah, fentanyl lollipops do exist.
Rights, correct?
But I support trans rights. Right? I don't support trans rights because it's a specific form of rights. I support human rights.
So you like trans people and like you think that they should have access to trans medical care?
I was talking about birth adults. Control. I wasn't even talking about like trans care, progesterone and estrogen.
I just love fucking with Scott. Okay, let me have this.
Since when?
So okay.
Birth control is more complicated than just progesterone. Yes or no? What?
Sure, there might be other things. I'm just saying that, like, if you are possessing progesterone,
medical care. Got it.
I said I have no problem what adults do with their bodies.
So
I don't support children. I don't support children.
You don't support children at all.
I mean, I support my own children.
I don't support the idea of children.
We need proof of life now for sure.
Terrible concept.
Crawl space.
They're like us, but smaller and more obnoxious. I hate it. Oh my god.
I think if you're I think if you're 16, 17 years old, and a doctor wants to do here's all right, I'll answer the question honestly, right? Because it's sometimes complicated to do it. What I think is children, adults, etc., all of them should be able to take all the fucking hormones that they want, etc., with parental permission. At the same time, I think child
while they're an adult,
while they're a child as well. Yeah, right? I'm all for. Listen, you're gonna have to let me get through with this.
Yeah.
You asked the question. Don't interrupt me.
I'm just trying to ask.
He said parental permission with the kid.
Right. Listen.
He said as an adult.
Dog. Stop talking. You asked me a question. You want the answer, and now you're getting confused as I'm explaining it.
I'm sorry. Go
right.
ahead.
Just. You're like, God, I feel like I'm watching a movie with my ex-girlfriend. She's like, what's happening here? And I'm like, watch the movie, bitch.
I said, go ahead. And now you're like doing like a diatribe paper. Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah. So I think that everybody should have access to whatever medical treatments that they want. to include
Okay.
any and all hormone therapy and even surgeries. At the same time, I think when a child comes of age, if they decide if they become a D-trans person and they decide that that is not what they wanted and that harmed them, then they should be able to, then the default is that those people that perform those surgeries and prescribed that medication should have to pay for the damages, including all of the corrective
Do you think that
surgeries,
we should do
all the
that
hormone.
when it comes
Shh,
to like?
shh, shh, shh. I'm almost done.
Okay. All right.
Right?
All right. All
Uh,
right. All right. Go ahead.
Forever. And if you do that, what will occur is that most of these clinics will realize that they have to be very, very careful and very meticulous in prescribing any of these things because they want to be absolutely sure that this person's not going to be fucking D-trans when they're 19 years old. There, that's my full answer.
Okay. So you think that just like it's a little inconsistent if I'm being honest, but whatever. Let's move on.
You could not in your wildest
That's
dreams find the
not-
inconsistency.
I have found
It's
two
not the subject,
topics
so I don't want to.
that are not trans topics, right? I know we love them on Twitch Politics.
I
but
didn't bring this shit up, all right?
I know.
I'm
I'm
just
saying-
curious.
Yes. That's what Scott's DMs are open, right? So hit him up if you want to know his opinions.
Dude,
for
you
trans
can-
people.
DM'd him, he
right,
didn't
I have-
respond.
Bullshit. I have responded to any DMs you've given to me.
What?
Uh-oh, we're gonna leak DMs now.
I'm not going to leak DMs on screen,
Alright,
but no, that's
alright,
bullshit.
well, yeah. Okay.
Look,
No,
I've
this is
interviewed
bullshit.
I've interviewed tons of D-trans people. I have been deeply in that fucking war. All right,
Okay,
my position
okay.
is consistent.
We are moving past. Hooray! Great. So, because I didn't expect, honestly, I didn't expect anyone to say they were okay with the with the police and the drone situation. That
Let alone
surprises
Lactoid.
me, right? As always, all right. But like I honestly thought like that was just going to be, we're all on the same page. Instead, like this is the last question, that prompt that I assumed we'd be focusing on. And if we can stop the encroachment of new forms of technological surveillance, can't stop, isn't it better to embrace them with heavy regulations? Shouldn't like we as a society, because I feel like the initial response is always just to say no to these
the hell?
things, but one way or the other, these things,
Sorry.
like
hold on.
I feel like it's difficult to put like the toothpaste in the butthole, right? Like I think like it's like
Right.
once it's out, it's hard to go back, right? And sometimes it's reasonable to go back. So like we're talking about like smartphones, and like a right to privacy when it comes to smartphones, but like where anyone can record you anywhere, right? Like are we going to ban cameras there? Like we banned what we did was we banned like side facing cameras. Did you ever hear about that? Like like I believe there's a regulation that says you can't like just have like a side facing camera, so that
Test.
if you're trying to record someone, you'd have to be straight on rather than sitting next to them and be able to record that way. That's my understanding. But that's like an example of like a regulation on the edge of things, that we'd accept that this technology is coming into our lives, that like there'll be more recordings of us everywhere. It's a shame if you think it's going to steal your soul. But like that's how our usual response is, and shouldn't that be what? Isn't that the most logical thing to do?
Yes.
Sorry,
So,
my headphones
I don't-
randomly cut off and I had to reset everything while you were talking. I'm sorry.
I don't know about logic.
I'll figure it out.
My
We'll
soul's
catch up.
stolen every time that I stream, of course.
Most realistic and probably practical and accessible. But I
So,
like that. I think we're
here
gonna
in
get to a point.
Texas,
Go ahead.
we banned traffic cams, like red light cams, and it wasn't necessarily due to privacy concerns. I don't know. I do know there. We all know about these instances where people like got a picture sent to their house with them, and the woman in the next seat was not their wife. That's happened on multiple occasions, so that is a sort of a privacy concern. But another reason
Hey.
was But another reason was because of safety concerns. People saw the flash go off, and so they tried to instantly hit their brakes so as like not to
Yeah.
get caught running through a red light, ends up causing an accident. So
Mm.
these are those unintended consequences that Scott keeps talking about, right? And so even in Texas here, where we support the cops, in the vast majority of cases, we finally got rid of them here, and it was a conservative like who wrote the bill that got rid of them there. So I think that, yeah, I think you're right that there are these instances where when there's a new use of a technology, especially if it's something that's for surveillance, our first instinct, even if we don't necessarily have a logical reason to fear it yet, or we haven't thought things through entirely, our first instinct is to sort of tap the brakes and just not do it for a while until we can figure out like what are all of the ethical issues.
Yeah. Did you have anything else you wanted to say, Corey? I just want to make sure that you got it all out.
I probably did, but well, so I guess maybe to expand on iCow's point there, because like, uh, I have no doubt. I don't know for sure, but I'm reasonably sure that it's going to get to the point that that technology is going to be there. We don't need a flash to take a picture at a stoplight. And so it's like, well, yeah, what do we do then now, where it's no longer a safety concern, right? And then going back to the question of whatever right to privacy, and is that even a thing? Because I can't. I have to assume that at some point a flash is not going to be super necessary to take a picture at a stoplight.
Right, but maybe they see a sign that says there's a camera here, and they see it right when it's like a second too late to stop.
So they kick their
There's a bunch of
their
yeah. There
their
goes the mistress out the window.
out the window.
Yeah.
I mean, the example you gave is just a money making racket. Like it has nothing to do with safety. It has nothing to do with enforcing traffic laws for for better, safer streets. It's just finding people that were ever so slightly not far enough into the lane or presumably speeding. And if there's errors, whatever, you have a right to face your accuser in court, but the accuser you're going to face in court is a malfunctioning fucking camera system that you have a burden of proving. You magically have the burden of proof to prove that it doesn't work for your car specifically, even though they're supposed to be the ones proving that the shit works. It's just a money making racket. Like, I'm glad it's not a thing in Texas.
I mean, I would agree with that. With like we're like, okay, so in like Florida,
to be fair, so are
specifically,
speeding tickets in general.
Okay, with Florida specifically, this is just something I have or not personally, but like I know the stats, whatever. But like, yeah, most of the traffic cams are in low income areas because it is like a racket to try and take advantage of like low income areas, which
I mean,
think
it's
is like super fucked, right?
I mean,
I
part of it
see
is
what you're
because
saying.
you're going to get more people that violate laws in low income areas, right? In
Yeah,
terms
of
of
course, because they're just like living a normal
well,
life. Yeah.
well, part of it might be a slight increased proclivity to crime, but more likely it's just population density, right? Like
Sure.
areas that are low socioeconomic status, you're gonna have a lot of people packed on top of each other, so you're gonna get more opportunities to get money. And then on top of that, those people are less likely to defend themselves in court because they can afford to show up to fucking court. They'll just
they
pay
can
it.
defend themselves, of course. Yeah. I'm agreeing with you.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I know. I was just adding context.
Okay, I just like a show. I didn't know if we were all gonna implode of you and me both agreeing with each other.
Okay.
That's a you thing. You keep trying to make this nemesis
I'm
thing a
just
thing.
joking. I want you to
No,
be
no,
my
no.
villain.
Prime
No,
keeps
you
trying
won't
to
do
make
it.
it a thing.
That's true. That's I don't know, man.
Prime's
Y'all
not
figure
saying
that
enough
out.
about it.
So
It is true.
I feel like I'm an unwilling
I-
participant in a wrestling show, and it's like I'm a heel and I don't know it, and then it's just like, what's going on?
So I did some Googling and I cannot find my factoid about the side facing cameras, but I know I've heard about this. I know I actually have heard about this.
So you're saying
Surprise me.
your sources trust me, bro? Is that what
That
you're
would very
saying?
much
Yeah.
much be a regulation on the edge of technology, wouldn't it be?
Yeah, you got me there. Yeah, but no, I swear to God, I've heard of this, like a discussion on exactly this. So and I can't
Okay.
remember. It was go ahead.
Prime, this makes me think of something. It makes me think of a couple things. One is the Boston Marathon bombings, where they took pictures from everybody's cell phones and then took the timestamps to the second and then overlaid them over like Google Maps images of the streets so that they could move step forward a second at a time in one direction or another. It was very Minority Report. Like they could see the entire street.
It's banned.
They could see the entire street a second later, and then a second later, and then a second later. It was all through people voluntarily sending their film rolls from their smartphones, like to them. And this was like in the early days of smartphones. Like I don't.
Yeah.
So what you're saying? So what you're saying is, I'm gonna go full blown. I can't remember that bitch from the Nina. Or not Nina, the fucking Jordan Peterson. Fuck, wow, what is her name? Kathy Newman. Kathy Newman. That's what I was thinking. So what you're saying is, when there's an actual crime where people are grievously wounded, people will voluntarily work together in order to and give up all of their privacy to stop to get as much information to stop it because people actually don't like terrorists. Oh, interesting.
Oh, okay, well, wait.
And then the second thing that makes me think of is like a Tesla has like something like 36 cameras pointing in every direction on it, right? So when we all have cars with that many number of
I don't know that most of those
that
cameras
direction,
actually like the data from those cameras can be like see anything really. I think most of those cameras are only designed for like
I'm just saying
self-driving.
I'm just saying as technology improves, we always get more of stuff, right? So maybe not all 36, maybe only 12 of the Tesla cameras are currently like high res and that you can download the image or whatever. I don't know exactly, but I do know that especially electric cars for some reason, because they're trying to collect data for self-driving cars and stuff like that, they're getting more and also because cameras are getting cheaper and cheaper, they're getting more and more angles all the time to the point where, I think side-facing cameras is just like one small slice of what that is, or will become.
Okay. So
can I just say one last thing? Just a general critique. You can't, although it's good when people like voluntarily submit the data. I mean, my understanding is, especially in certain areas, there's times in which people will be killed and nobody will say anything to the police. Right?
Yeah, certain areas like where the police constantly fuck them over and violate their rights as you increase their ability to violate rights.
Sure.
Although
although I'm curious though, if with police drones, wouldn't this put police in less like physical contact with like denizens? And so you would have less opportunities for like violent encounters.
They probably like attach a gun to it.
It does that does not flow, right? Because like the presumption that it would lead to less police contact with individuals would require an assumption that the funding for the police would stay like relatively the same, the amount of cops would stay relatively the same, the patrol duties would stay relatively the same, and then they would pull a couple of cops from patrolling to then utilize the drones. And so by that would make sense, but there isn't any reason to believe that they might just create more work for themselves and more justification for funding and thus have more interactions with people.
Yeah. So is it an empirical question for you? Like if you did see less police interactions,
it's never an empirical question for me because I'm deontological. I'm a libertarian.
Okay. But my response, your response to my suggestion was you don't think that would actually be the case. And so my question is, if it was the case, then what? Like if you did see less police on the streets, like harassing people.
So two things.
It'd be a good thing, right?
So two things. My response wasn't, I think it's the opposite of what you're saying. What my response is, I don't think we know what you claim to think logically follows, which is that it would lead to less police interaction. I'm saying it could just as easily lead to more police interaction. We don't know. The second thing I would say is the only reason I engage in kind of empirics upon things of which I already have a moral position stated that I'm against from a deontological perspective is because the rest of you people need consequentialist analysis to come to my side. So I explain it from your moral framework. Nina, of all the people here, you shouldn't be the one saying that.
I don't know. I do think that like
you have not convinced anybody.
I do
think
the
one that's gonna say that.
Lactode and Corey.
I do think that like I would want to see the empirics of it because when a lot of deadly police encounters oftentimes revolve around a cop saying like, I was scared for my life, like a regular traffic stop or whatever, like I was scared for my life, and then you reacted. And, like, I can imagine a future of like, where you had robo drones that were basically like, pulling people over and then like flying up, and then you would drop like your license and registration in like the box it's carrying, or like it would scan it, shit like that. In which there is no, at that point, like you wouldn't have to arm the drones because there's no cop whose life is in danger. And I think there's a very like intuitive pathway there. Maybe I have to see if it's actually empirical, but intuitive pathway of like once you remove that element out of it, the element of danger to the worker, you very well might see like fewer deadly police
Actually,
interactions.
I think the opposite.
Yeah.
Like there's another.
But what is
We gotta
violence?
go, Corey, because to finish things out. But like I think the opposite formulation would just be that you can't. Well, not the opposite, but you once you give these police more opportunity to surveil, they'll just use that more opportunities to make more encounters, right? Like we
Could be,
can't
yeah.
trust the police
It could be.
to like literally follow the regulations to the law, or they could just see something that like in the course it's like with traffic laws, right? Where like if you follow a person like long enough, you're definitely gonna find something to pull them over with, and that'll just increase the like actual interaction. So I don't know. Let's go to our friend Corey.
Well, yeah, so to pretty much expand on that, and to expand on Lactoid's example, and to bring in another movie that's not banned, Judge Dredd, but the original Judge Dredd with Stallone, where it's like, yeah, robo drones, where like with the outline of like, yeah, non-lethal drones. But I think I can see the other direction of like, well, police justifying like, we need drones, and we need drones with lethal force. And then now you have like more encounters, and now you have police, far away. And they're just controlling robots with lethal force. Because I can see that.
The American government with drones that are lethal? No.
So, like, listen. You don't even need drones with lethal force for like this to become a nightmare dystopia, where you have drones going everywhere, scanning people's IDs, looking for evidence of like the most minor legal infractions within your own private lives, and then immediately connecting to your bank account and just pulling money out of your bank account as a fine, or putting a stop payment or hold on your bank account until you go to your day in court, and then you get pissed off because the thing won't leave you alone while you're trying to do whatever it is that you're trying to do, and it becomes this intrusive force that you're not legally allowed to force out of your property, that's just bothering you. Like, there's so many different ways that this can become a problem. We have this weird obsession within our culture, where we believe this idea that violence is like physical contact. We believe that violence is physical contact, instead of recognizing that private property rights, aggression of form against those things is violent. Like petty theft is a form of violence that harms people and enslaves their lives. And
property.
You poor thing.
We're gonna go there.
I don't even think you can even explain that effectively, which is hilarious because it's stupid.
I'm sorry. I'll let you cook.
When your life, when the state starts coming after your livelihood and starts, finding more and more ways to fine you and bleed you out of these things, like, well, does it matter that the cop didn't like rough you up or beat you up? There are scenarios where I would rather have my ass kicked by a cop and get a small payday or even a big payday than like have them constantly find me for all of these like bullshit interactions.
Wait, those paydays are paid for by taxpayer. Like that's an awful scenario.
Simple question.
Yeah, no, I agree. I'm just saying, if I had gun to my head, I have to choose between two things, right? Like I'd rather get my ass kicked by a cop.
That's my question.
Right, I'd rather get my ass kicked by a cop sometimes than like.
That's crazy.
No, that's only crazy because you haven't actually been really poor in this fucking country before. You haven't been in a position where you can't afford your car insurance.
Yes, I have been poor.
And then when you can't afford your car insurance, then you have then your license gets canceled, and then then your car gets towed. Then when you want to try and get a new car, you have SR22 insurance, and then you have to pay a license reinstatement fee. It is Bernie Sanders. One of the only few base things he ever said was it's really expensive to be poor in this country.
Okay,
and when the state gets more power, it is going to be even worse.
I don't think we need to hear more from a rich Canadian.
He
doesn't understand things.
So I have been poor, first of all, and second of all, everything you're saying right now is just an argument for why we shouldn't enforce laws against poor people. I'm sorry, right? If the issue is that you believe certain laws are unfair.
That's a lie. That's a lie. No, I'm saying we shouldn't have fucking.
You literally started off by saying, I don't know if you know what it's like to be poor, okay?
No,
but when you're poor, you got all these fines, you got all this shit.
Stop. No. Don't straw man me. Don't straw man me. Nina, we don't need you.
You can rewind the fucking VOD and see what you said. You are straw manning me. Why'd you bring up my economic position if you weren't?
You're straw manning me. You're straw manning me. I'm going to call you out on your bullshit right now. I am not saying in any way, shape, or form that we shouldn't enforce laws on poor people. What I am saying is we shouldn't give police the ability to bring drones into people's homes so that they can find bullshit and into people's backyards so they can find bullshit interactions to charge them with bullshit fees for non-violent crimes. That is, that's why we should expand the state.
No. This is you straw manning now, because what we talked about before.
I'm straw manning my own position, bitch.
No, you're straw manning me. You're literally straw manning.
No, I'm just saying what my position is.
And if you let me finish, you are straw manning my position. Okay, my response to what you said. Okay, literally when I said it sounds like the issues. First of all, why was my personal economic situation relevant if you weren't bringing up poverty? Second of all, when you're talking about. We're talking about police drones, traffic infractions. You brought up multiple times traffic infractions. What if they didn't buy insurance? What if they're driving on the road?
Public property doesn't exist.
I'm talking.
You'd know that if you were a libertarian.
Public property, Public property doesn't exist.
You're a fucking Republican.
Let Lactoid go.
So I know in your mind that in order to be a libertarian, you have to be an anarcho-capitalist. This is the only pure way to do it, okay? In my position,
you just don't have to be for the expansion of the police state.
Let me finish. You were getting on Nina for doing this. Now you're doing it. Okay, stop. So in my position, I think libertarian is actually a much broader umbrella term that encompasses a whole bunch of different thoughts and doesn't necessarily mean you to be against the entire construction of the state. Otherwise, you're not a libertarian. Maybe that's your position. Maybe that's your how you feel about it. That's totally fine. You can talk about how I'm not a libertarian until the cows go home. You can have fun with that. I don't care. What I'm saying is, in the conversation that we just had, okay, you did not bring up drones going into people's houses. I didn't bring that up. What was being talked about was you were denigrating my economic standing, or you were saying I don't know if you understand, some kind of appeal to my history. And then second of all, you were talking about drivers on a public road about not having insurance. So when they hit somebody, they can't pay them. Or drivers on a fucking road speeding or doing other traffic infractions, how we shouldn't have drones be fining them and ticketing them. And then my question for you was, okay, so is your objection here the fact that we're enforcing the laws against the poor people? Or is your objection about the fact that we have these laws in the first place? And if we have the laws in the first place, then shouldn't we apply them equally to poor people? Or am I fucking wrong? Is there a fucking line here? Whereas if you're poor enough, then you can just get off. No more speeding tickets for you, sir. Turns out you made $10,000 last year, so you can go 95 in a 25 school zone.
Let's cut through your sophistry and your bullshit because you're mad because I'm calling you the Republican that you are.
Rewind the VOD.
Yeah. So why did I bring up the fact that you weren't poor? Is because you were objecting as I was speaking about the idea that it is more expensive and that these things disproportionately affect the poor. And the only reason I bring up this empirical shit is because I have to talk to commie fucks like you that derive all of your morality from consequentialism, which just makes you the same fucking socialist as you supposedly
you were clutching pearls. Oh, the poor people. Bernie Sanders was right. Poor people have it so hard.
So you admit it. So you admitted now, bitch. So you admitted now, bitch. You admit that you were cutting me off, and that's why I responded with that perspective.
I was rolling my eyes.
Now it's a new fucking thing.
You try to gain favor with these leftists here by sucking off the poor. Who gives a fuck? Okay, I'm not concerned with what the fuck Bernie Sanders has to say. I don't watch him. Maybe you do. But what I'm talking about is like equal application of the law when it comes to like public fucking places and whether or not we should have drones doing
Public
this.
property is a rights violation. The existence of public property is a violation of rights.
All roads, everything, all tax. Yeah, sure, okay.
Okay.
My bad.
All right. So
I forgot. I can't be a libertarian unless like I'm literally a clone of Hop. Otherwise, there's no other schools of thought. Milton Friedman didn't actually exist. Blah 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 blah.
Crazy. Bitch, I said you can't be a libertarian if you're for the expansion of the police state. If we go ahead and have a fucking poll against all Libertarian Party card member holders, including the Prags, right, and say, hey, are you a libertarian if you're for the expansion of the police state? Pretty sure it's going to be a resounding hell fucking no.
So on that example, because I thought what Scott said is interesting, and we're like a little over time, but I do want to ask this question. Like hovering over your backyard, and like finding you. Like I think that's like an interesting construction because like that seems totally like I yell at Scott about his like slippery slope arguments all the time, but like that doesn't seem very far down the slope at all. That like, well, the police saw you, right? A police officer can find you for doing certain things, and so
what happens when that's normalized?
Yeah. Like, and they just like hit you with a fine and like it goes straight to your address or whatever. Black Toy. I'm sorry. This was Steve.
I thought you were talking to Scott. I'm very sorry. I was
no problem. I didn't call you out.
Go ahead.
No problem. Yeah. So I like talking about like the drones hanging over your yard. Like, do you think that's like a reasonable fare? And do you think that if that were the case, if the cops were finding people from like drone footage, would that be a reasonable thing for the state to do? And if not, then what should we do about that?
Yeah, I think it would be a reasonable thing for the state to do. I understand why people would feel very uncomfortable about it, because I would too. If I'm so I don't want to here. I'm not going to give too much personal information, but there's been situations I've been in where like the only place to have a public function is in public, or if it's in a place that's directly visible to the public street. Okay, because I wasn't fortunate enough to have an area where that would be like yard considered private. And in that situation, if a cop pulled up on the road and just stood there, like sat there and was looking at me, I'd feel deeply uncomfortable. But it wouldn't like, what would I do? Go tell the cop to leave? Like they're sitting there on the road where, it's a public roadway. They're sitting there and they're watching us. Okay. Kind of fucking weird, justified to feel uncomfortable. But to me, this is like identical to a drone is like hovering above the backyard.
Yes.
If the drone is hovering in the above like the above my backyard, same kind of feeling where it's like, that's fucking weird. I don't like that. But it's not my airspace, right? I can't tell them to leave.
But hold on. Do you think but do you think that I get that it's not your airspace, true, but do you think that would be a reasonable state for society to find itself in, where the cops can, if they want to, and it's going to be certain neighborhoods, right? Like it's not going to over Beverly Hills, it's not going to be doing this. Just like
they'll have the giant awnings. That's why
they can afford. Yeah, they'll buy the giant awnings, and the crime that happens in Hollywood isn't going to be the crime that's going to be able to be picked up in a backyard.
But to park a drone there, or not even a drone, don't have to go that far. Like security cameras and like random areas where they can see into yards or whatever, right? And then just like hit people with fines. Like, is that the society that we want? Is that like a fair society? Like, can you admit that this is a worse society than the one we have?
Can I maybe?
Is it simply one second? Or is it that simply having that law makes it like just in your mind? Like you're saying like we should apply the law equally to poor people. Well, then we're just applying the laws here, so it really doesn't matter.
Yeah, the law. Yeah, right. So if the contention is like, what are they fining you for, right? Like if there's some law that says you can only have a maximum of 15 people in your backyard at any given time, like I would agree that's a fucking terrible law. My approach wouldn't be like, well, we need to eliminate the ways in which police enforce laws. We should be saying, why the fuck do we have this law in which I can't have more than 15 people in my backyard, right? That's the question to be had, not actually as to the droning.
I think that this
same with warfare.
This might maybe be the maybe I can get you a little more over to my side, Lactoid. You've seen Citizen 4, right?
No.
Okay, well, I don't know what the fuck is wrong with you if you haven't seen.
I've seen all 3 Atlas Shrugs.
Let's move
okay,
on. Let's move on.
Atlas Shrugs, but I haven't seen this.
Okay, so if you've read and followed Edward Snowden's journey, right? Yeah. All those years back, you know that at the time the state had the capacity to link metadata and track any American, including their email, their phone call, who they were calling, their GPS locations, all of these things, years and years and years ago, and that they were doing everything they could to expand their power, that multiple people lied to Congress and lied to the American public about it, and that no one, not a single person was punished or went to jail, and that all of those institutions continued to gain power. And we have no idea how powerful those institutions are in the background. And what we're now talking about is an agency, like a country where we know that there are massive federal agencies that likely have the capability of instantaneously connecting all of our metadata together. And we're talking about increasing that to allow the police state to also casually record our domiciles, our homes, what it is we do on a daily basis, have more and more video evidence, more and more things. And so my question is, if you're a right winger and you just saw, Proud Boys guys take down a barricade and have a, Capitol building tour, get 17 years in prison. Or if you're a lefty and you're looking at people protesting against, like Antifa in fucking Portland, but they don't blow anything up this time. Why do you want an expansion of power to such a degree where we can make this problem worse, where the state gets even more all powerful over our lives? How is that a recipe for anything other than a fucking dystopia that is rapidly approaching?
First of all, you said imagine Antifa not blowing something up. I don't engage in unrealistic hypotheticals. So then the second point, I guess the broader point. I would agree with you that I actually think that the biggest problem there is like a lack of transparency among federal agencies, and in some cases, the very existence of the federal agencies themselves. In this case, we're talking about like a local police service using drones, which I have much less of an issue with. I have a big issue with like perhaps the existence of the FBI as it currently exists, or the ATF, or like these broader like federal agencies, because I don't disagree with you, Scott, that there's a lot of opaqueness and obscurity and lies that they consistently tell to Congress and to the people who they're supposed to work for, and I think that's probably where the problem is, and so that's where I want to clean things up. So and maybe we could pass like a bill that did both things, where it's called the Mutual Transparency Act, where
bills don't matter, as proven by what I just said.
Okay,
your rights are fucking imaginary.
An amendment, we do something in which the Mutual Transparency Amendment, in which cops get to have drones and we get to have cameras in every congressional room.
Yeah, I might
with a live feed at all times.
Yeah, I might actually take that. Cool. Let's we're go to Corey. I just want to say quickly that like I want to have a deeper conversation, longer conversation with you, Lactoid, on your construction of like state power and law enforcement, because I think it's like surprising that you would say that you'd have you draw this distinction between local law enforcement and federal law enforcement. I think it's super interesting that you've said that, and I would really want to examine that. But our friend Corey's been waiting.
And then not in principle, just in like history. But go ahead, Corey.
Well, first, I'm not sure if Nina knows that they're not in the Discord voice channel, or if anybody else.
I was about to say, yeah.
And second, just to fully understand like where Lactoid's limits lie or don't lie, like so, presumably like we're probably already there. But let's just say we have there's solar powered drones, so they don't need to be recharged or anything. Like you're presumably okay with like just like having a drone.
Nuclear power, all right?
Sitting above each house, like over the whole country.
Like just in the backyard, and anyone that has a backyard, just outside my window, that is like permissible for you currently.
Yeah, I mean, constitutionally, I think it would be. I would say this: I would buy a awning that would cover up my entire backyard.
Yeah, well, so there's definitely disagreement there, but that's different. Well, not the awning part, but like, yeah, I don't want to get to that world.
Or I wouldn't even go in my yard, to be honest.
That's why I tend to lean more towards Scott here. But like, I'm also on the
Although
same
Corey, wait, hold on real quick though, because I go in public when there's police, and so like maybe I would still go. Maybe I would still go in my yard. I guess I don't know. And my yard's visible from the street, so I mean,
well,
cops could drive by and see
like,
me in my nefarious activities. What am I
That's
gonna
what, like,
do?
I think, like, in my mind, that's why I'm trying to thread the needle. Like, if these people are gonna have the power, then, like, yeah, I agree with you. Like, we should be able to have drones in, like, congressional offices, and, like, people should just be able to fly drones, like, to spy on, like, their politicians and all that stuff, to hold them accountable.
No. That shouldn't. No. That should not be something that like citizens have to like do. That should be something that is done. Like so, like, you should be able to log into any kind of government website, and there should be like a section that says like the live feeds, like one of these fucking like
I agree,
like porn websites, right? And then you go to the live feed, and it has like cameras all over the.
But if we can get to that place, but do you actually think politicians will actually legislate that and actually like allow that infrastructure to be there?
I don't.
I'm skeptical. That's why it's like, well, better put it in the hands of the citizens.
But here's the thing though, right? Because now if we're going to talk about like political efficacy, right? Like, oh, the politicians aren't going to do that. Yeah, well, they're also not going to listen to like us when we're yelling about them flying drones. I mean, they're going to do what they do, and we can oppose it or we can, state our opinion on it. But
right, which is why we should always collectively oppose increases to state power and become a unifying force across the country. Even if we can't all be fucking ANCAPs, we can recognize that cops fucking suck and abuse everybody's rights. It doesn't matter your skin color. It doesn't matter who you vote for. Cops fucking suck, and we should not give them more power.
I think there's been actually, honestly, great strides when it comes to police transparency. The advent of body cams and how much more they're being used now, I think is fucking amazing. They're definitely, obviously, being used more than they were like back in the 90s when they didn't fucking exist. I mean, we see like we hear about a shooting, and like most of the time, like there's a body cam footage of it, right? There's some kind of like dash cam footage. Like we have recordings of these public officials, which is good, and we should keep doing that. But like that's something that just didn't exist like back in the 90s. And if in the 90s, like I don't know, like what if they were like, we should never have these cameras on like police officers, but we did. We managed to get that done, and now we get to see them do their jobs.
Your argument is it's we have cameras on them as they violate people's rights, so it's dope.
My argument is that it's not so bad. My argument is that like by being able to see them and like there's like this sort of catastrophizing of like everything's getting worse, and some things are getting worse. But one of the things that's like getting better is like when you look at overall like fucking stat lines, is like police officers are held accountable more now than they used to be. They are recorded more. We get to see what they get to do. Crime overall is like down from the 90s, right? We're seeing like trends that are happening that generally point to an overall good direction, which is more accountability for law enforcement and what appears to be more efficacy for law enforcement.
So your argument is that the abuse, the extreme level sections of abuse occur less often. And that's because of work that advocacy groups that are anti-police have done for time and time and time again, and have gotten them to get a little bit better. I mean, like, I don't disagree that there are likely less, that the statistics are doing better and trending in a better direction. The problem is that we're talking about police violating a set of rules that expand. Right. So in one hand, you can say, well, police killings have gone down. You can say that like the likelihood that a police officer plants weed in your car because so many more of them have body cams is going down, and they're more likely to get in trouble. And it's like true, but also civil asset forfeiture has gotten way fucking worse. Like there are other metrics in which the police have gotten worse since the 90s, because this is what happens when you have politicians running a monopoly on power and violence.
Yeah, like I said before, there's some things that are getting worse. Civil asset forfeiture is a big issue, and I'm not going to like try to defend that in any way.
Yeah, fair enough.